we were recording those the session, and we'll send you back the link so you can replay this or share it with anybody you like to, so you can have access throughout the session or post the session, so you'll have access to that. And BrainFood as a community was really set up on three fundamental principles. The first being community. So it's wonderful to see so many people joining us again on another one of these events that we're doing. Lovely to see either your pictures or your videos, to see your faces. It's great to see so many with us. So community has always been the first part. The second part of BrainFood is about curiosity, which again is why we have these conversations. We like to get curious, we like to discover, we like to understand different aspects of this wonderful role that we all play in terms of helping our businesses and clients with leadership, with our learning. And then the third aspect that underpins BrainFood is about inspiration. Again, if we can take one thing away from these conversations that inspires us to go and do something different, then that's a great place to be. So want to say a real big thank you again for being here. There's people are already on the chat, which is great, saying hello to everybody, so love that. So without further ado, actually I forgot to introduce myself, actually, for those who've not met me before. So my name's Hayden. I'm one of the founders of BrainFood. There are several others on the call today, so Julia, Richard, Jen, Caroline are here with us as well, so they've been with us since the start. So yeah, we set up BrainFood last July, was our first event, and we've absolutely loved this growing community that we're creating. And we've got lots of people who've been with us throughout that journey as well. So thank you for your continued support. So without further ado, I'll just hand over to our guest, Toby, and ask him to share a little bit about himself and tell you all about a bit of his background.
Perfect. Cool. Thank you very much, Hayden. Thank you for having me. I look forward to this conversation and many more to come. So my name's Toby Newman. I currently work for a company called Here Technologies. We're a open location platform company, but I've been working in L&D for almost 20 years or so. I kind of have my own side hustles, what they call it in the Netherlands. It's where I'm based. I don't quite like the term side hustle. It's given a kind of a negative connotation, but there you go. And basically, I just kind of try as much as I can to share my own experiences, my own journey from being a kind of frontline trainer all the way up to kind of where I am at the moment, and just trying to encourage more and more people to think slightly differently within L&D if they haven't already, but also much more about the practical senses of doing things. So it's all very well and good for me to go, oh, everybody should be doing a learning culture, but what does that actually mean? What do you actually physically have to do to at least start doing something? And that's where I kind of like to, not necessarily unleash, but that's where I'd like to sit in that kind of very much practical sense.
Thank you, Toby. Great stuff. Yeah, no, it's great. And I've been connected to Toby for a short while now. And if you didn't know, Toby's done a TED Talk, so do go onto his YouTube channel and check it out.
You like Jurassic Park?
Like Jurassic Park. It's a great talk, actually, so I would encourage you. Just a little bit of background noise. So if you can all just make sure that your mics are on mute, it'll just help with the conversation so we don't get that interference, if you wouldn't mind. That'd be really helpful. Thank you. So, Toby, thank you once again for joining us today. Really looking forward to this conversation, this discussion. So today's session is all about keeping ahead of the curve. So I just really want to know, what do you mean by that?
Well, I'm not going to take the credit of saying it's something I came up with, because I'm sure there's a lot more cleverer people out there that came up with it. But basically what I've tried to do is take two different curves and just explain how important it is that we have this kind of learning culture, which I know we'll talk about in a second. But in a sense, it is Moore's law, which is, now again, I'm not a scientist, but it is the exponential growth of transistors within computers. So it's how quickly computers speed up. I mean, if you kind of my generation, you'll remember kind of floppy disks, and they're not table mats or anything. And going from like 8 bits and thinking, oh my God, it can go up to 16 bits. And now look at quantum computing. I mean, it's just crazy. And so what I've done is I've taken kind of that curve of that exponential growth. And then if we take the learning curve, and it's, that's kind of S-shaped, where you kind of have you get to know something, you accelerate your own learning, and then you become an expert, and it kind of tails off. But again, if I could draw it, it'd be easier. But it's basically, you've got exponential growth. So if you're, let me make sure I'm in the camera here. So if you're down here and learning something here, then you learn something, and you're congratulations, you're an expert over here. But by that time, it's not only has it gone past your level of knowledge, it's gone into something completely different. It's gone into machine learning or cloud computing or whatever. And so it's, the idea is that rather than traditionally kind of, doing this S curve of learning something, is the idea to try and keep ahead of this exponential growth. It's not easy. It's almost impossible, but it's if you have that mindset, and that's one thing I'll talk about a lot today, is that mindset to think I need to keep on driving. That's kind of what I mean by ahead of the curve.
So I love that, and again, I'm sure we will definitely dig underneath this a little bit more as we go through today to see that, because I think it's it's a real challenge for us to how we do stay ahead of that curve when the curve is as exponential as you describe about. So tell us a bit more about kind of, so you've referenced kind of learning curves, and you've referenced about the curve itself. So tell us a bit more about kind of how you see that in practical terms. So that's kind of the theory. How do you see that in practical terms?
Yeah. Okay. So, and a lot of kind of maybe traditional trainers don't like hearing this. But for me, one of my biggest things is that as a trainer, we should be in that mindset of we no longer own the content. We no longer drive it. In the old skate, and I was one of those trainers that would be, I know everything about this particular topic, and I'm going to run workshops, and I'm going to run training sessions, and you're going to listen to what I'm doing, and you're going to do exactly how I do it, and you're going to go off and be experts yourself. And then the next group, and the next group, and the next group. But as technology moves so quickly, as everything in today's environment, and obviously with the COVID stuff, it doesn't help. Be that expert anymore. If you found a very niche area that you can say I'm an expert in that, great. But you've got a very short time span. I guarantee that within maybe months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, that knowledge will be non-existent. People won't need that knowledge anymore because they've moved on to different topics. So it's that idea to say, let go. It's always, I feel like the Star Wars and the Force, like let go of your Force, and but it's more about embracing technologies, maybe not embracing the process of always learning and figuring out a way to support others and bring that knowledge to others. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is that to be a conduit rather than the source of knowledge. So what I see myself is, even though I work for a company, I name myself as a consultant, an in-house consultant. So the idea is that I identify and help subject matter experts, SMEs. I then help them to become better. I ask them to know how to do video, to be able to get a script out, to be able to put their thoughts into a logical process of a training course. And then my job is then to take that information and make sure that everybody else knows about it. So kind of meet Mr. A, meet Mrs. B, but now you're connected, and that community then grows. So then I'm not holding on to any knowledge. Well, I'm holding on to the knowledge of being a good consultant. Maybe that's the best way of putting it.
So I'd love the couple of things that you've just shared there, which really resonated for me, and just Julia's put on the chat there, just around kind of the pressure that used to exist when we needed to be the expert and everything. A couple of things that really kind of come to me, which is, so the love of being a consultant, and that word consultant can really kind of resonate. And then I love your use of the word conduit, because we're often there's often this phrase that L&D becomes the curator. But actually, the conduit, I think, is a much more powerful phrase to use. So
yeah, when I think curator, I think of the actual content itself. So, when I talk about blended learning, and I'm sure everybody in this call knows everything about blended learning, probably a lot more than I do, but it's very much about taking created content and then blending it with curated content to be able to kind of go, there you go, and then just point them. I think you probably kind of said this a lot as well, is that we are marketing managers now. We are communication. I probably do more communication than actual training. And it's almost like it's a skill that, as an L&D person, I probably am not trained in. And maybe that's something I should actually do more of, and actually get official training in communication and marketing to be able to push these things. Because I think that's the future.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because one of the things that I've learned in my journey since I left the corporate world and went into running my own consultancy is that I'm a marketeer who happens to coach and deliver leadership development.
Yeah.
I'm not a leadership development specialist who happens to do marketing. It has to come the other way around, which is interesting. So I just want to, you mentioned a couple of times this kind of phrase or word around learning cultures. So I guess what I really want to know is, do learning cultures really exist, or is it just another buzzword to add to our bingo sheets?
If I'm being honest, it is. Now, obviously, you may kind of think, oh no, it's important. Learning, I must admit, I actually hate the word learning culture, because it comes with a, how do I put it? It comes with a kind of like thinking that you weren't training or weren't learning before. Now I'm going to help you to learn. And that's BS. It's because we're all learning. I mean, even from kids, we're constantly learning. For me, learning culture, and people refer to it as a learning mindset, lifelong learning. But the thing that that isn't used, which I think should be used, is conscious. So, for example, I'll give, maybe I'll put it out to the crowd that we've got here. Even if we all believe that we're all in this, learning mindset, is that I almost guarantee, if we exclude this session, that everybody in this call has taken a course in the last probably week, maybe even month, has read articles, read books on many different topics, not just in L&D. But again, let me put it out to the board, to the group. How many of you have actively shared that with your own peers or your own manager to say, I read a really interesting article last week about this. Let's talk about it. Or how many of you have shared that article, or so you've taken a course and actively shared it with somebody else that you think, you might actually like this because I liked it. And that's what I mean by a learning culture. It's not necessarily, oh, I need to start learning. It's about that conscious effort to say, not only am I need to learn, where am I going? So self-reflection, self-awareness is so important. What am I actually learning? I use the term synthesis that actually came out of higher education. And a synthesis, basically what it does, and I do this with every course, is a little snippet, is that take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, and put on the left-hand side all the key takeaways that you took away from this course. Not what I want you to take away, but what you took away. And that could just be the way I presented it. It could be the way somebody else said, not necessarily the content. And then on the right-hand side, you write down what action you are going to do to put that takeaway into place. So that's where the synthesis is. Not just key takeaways, it's an action against them. So that's one way to be conscious about doing things. Again, like I said, like consciously giving tips, sharing articles. Another good practical way is that in every team meeting, dedicate at the start, not at the end, because that shows that you kind of, it's just an add-on. At the start of every meeting, dedicate 5 minutes to what people learn. What was the last person somebody read or watched? What do they like about it? And dedicate time for that, and then kind of get on with the rest of the meeting or whatever. But it's just some practical things that you can say, takes the learning culture and turns it into something that people can actually do.
Yes, again.
Sorry, I like to rant. It's like I get passionate.
It's good to get on a bit of a rant about something, because I think you're absolutely right. that synthesis that you talk about is where you translate it from being a passive process into an active process. And I'm just seeing David come on the shot chat there saying that he's many times has shared stuff. So great stuff, David. You're clearly role modeling what we're looking to see. And it is that becoming active in that process, which I really like. So just want to reach out to everybody who's on the call. If you have got any questions for Toby, please do use the chat just to send them over. It'd be great to do those. We've just got a question from Susan there.
Yeah.
I love that.
So it can, so there's a couple of things. First of all, we're actually trialing a company called Get Abstract. I think Blinkist do the same thing, or a similar thing, where they take books and they kind of, take it down to an abstract of 15 minutes and put it out as a video. I personally, whenever I see, for example, I was looking at Who Moved My Fish, Who Moved My Cheese, which is a kind of a marketing book. But when I pushed it out to the wider audience, I pushed out the book, so the PDF, where to buy the book, but I also sent out a YouTube clip that somebody was talking about it. And there was a TEDx talk that talked about it as well. So it's about not just, I've got to read a book and let's share it, but it's finding different ways to do it. But also, if you are a person that loves a book, and I'm a very, very slow reader. I love books, but I'm a very slow reader. So it might be that you take a chapter, or that you might kind of, as you're reading, just have a little notebook by the side of you, or use your phone's notebook to think, that's a great quote, or that's a great word, that's a great line. And then that I share, not the whole book. Just an example.
And I love that fact of that kind of alchemy that happens when you take some content that you've received, whether it be a book or a video or some information, and that gets mixed up with your own learning, knowledge, experience, and thoughts. And actually, those connections that you form, and when you articulate those to others, that can be really powerful as well. That kind of? And
I always think to kind of not to be shy. You shouldn't be shy about sharing your own comments and ideas. You kind of, obviously in this day and age, you've got to be kind of maybe sensitive about it, or at least think about it. But don't be afraid to kind of think against it. So I mean, like in this group, I know we said this before the call, that if people kind of not.
Oh, we lost your audio, Toby, I think. No, it's still not. Can other people in the chat just let us know whether you can hear Toby or not? Okay, yeah, it looks like your sound's... So it looks like we've lost Toby's connection. So he's going to dial back out and come back in. Hopefully, whilst Toby's just doing that and coming back into the session, hopefully you're taking some things away from this. So maybe as we're in this like pause as we go through, just have a think about if there's anything that you would like to ask Toby when he comes back in to think around this particular subject around staying ahead of the curve, which is where we started. How do we match up those S curves with the exponential growth that we're seeing, and really get into this subject of learning cultures and how do we create them. So let me just get Toby back in. So he's just joining, so hopefully we'll see him come back on in just a second. So welcome back, Toby.
Can you hear me?
Yes, great.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Brilliant. Good stuff.
Love the technology.
Absolutely. Great. We were just saying about kind of this mixing up and not being afraid to share opinions and views and thoughts.
Yeah. I'll leave that one there.
Okay, perfect. So one of the things I guess I'm really interested in, if we are going to talk about creating learning cultures or whatever we want to call them, is there's this kind of drive for people to take responsibility for their own learning. So this kind of sense of, shouldn't learners own their own self-development?
Yeah.
So I guess one of my questions is that just a cop out from the business that should be providing more meaningful learning for people and maybe arming managers with the right skills to actively engage their teams, or really should we be driving this real personal ownership of your growth? Where do you sit on
No, it's a complete cop out. I'm just a very lazy person,
that?
and I want to do as less work as possible. But in essence, it can be seen as that. And going back to what we said before about marketing and communication, is that you can't just say, right, everybody, we're going to drive self-development, and you're all going to be self-determined learners. Thank you very much. Goodbye. You just can't do that. So what you've got to do is, I always love to use the term we FM, like you tune into, nowadays you don't tune into radio signals, but if you tune into we FM, it stands for what's in it for me. And if you always have that mindset of, why am I doing this for the customer? What's the benefit to the customer? And that's another thing. I talk about customers, I don't talk about participants, because they are, if you have that customer centricity mindset, or the what's in it for me, whatever you want to talk about, is that if you think in that way, then rather than just saying, oh yeah, everybody should be a self-directed learner, what you're saying is, if you become a self-directed learner, it means that you have more control over your pace. It means you have more control over what you absorb and how you absorb it. This whole idea of people have different learning styles, I'm on the fence. I agree and I disagree in some areas, but like, for example, I love podcasts. I'm really big into podcasts at the moment, and I will much happily listen to a podcast doing something else than sit down and read a book. That doesn't mean that I'm a particular style. It just means that's my personal preference. So it means that if you give these things out, that's in different ways, people can absorb them differently. But it also means, as a trainer, as a learner, as a learning and development consultant, or whatever we want to call it, it means we can concentrate on other things. It means, rather than having to run workshop after workshop, and in the old days travel, but in these days at least prepare, it means that you can start to look elsewhere. You can, for example, look at alternative curated resources to push your point forward. You can look at new technologies, new platforms to be able to support your needs, rather than having to run the same workshop over and over again. And like we said before, it allows you to be a better consultant, a better communicator, and let the learners get on so that you can help them when they do need help.
So absolutely great points. Just Jen's just putting there, hold a weekly 30-minute meeting of sharing knowledge picked up during this week. It was fun, and sometimes totally random things would come out, increasing creativity levels too.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Because it gets to the point where, like, people want to, if you create a habit, and I'm a big believer of that, it's an obvious thing, but creating habits around learning is something that we all need to do. And we can't just do it once. It needs to be over and over again. And those little snippets then start to grow other things. You think, oh, that's a great idea. We could try this, and we could try this. And and it snowballs. But it's got to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that discipline of 30 minutes in your session, or as you articulated earlier, starting off your meeting with 5-10 minutes where people just share some of their insights that they've gained over the last week, can be a great way for that to start.
And it is important to kind of go slow. I was actually talking to my missus about she talked about diets and fitness and all that kind of stuff, and we were talking about the idea that people jump into something, think, oh, right, now we're going to be a learning culture, right? Everything's going to be about learning. No, because otherwise you just go too fast too soon. You need to just drip feed it, kind of thing. Just do 5 minutes. If you're already doing a half an hour session, that's great. Keep that going. But if you haven't started anything, going from nothing to a half an hour session on right now, share with me what you've learned, you're like, oh, kind of thing. So you need to kind of start slowly and build it up and build it up and build it up.
Absolutely. And so I guess what I want to just get a little bit into is kind of the practical side of it. So again, we're kind of talking about kind of the broad concepts of this, but from some of your experiences, some of the things that you've done, how do you kind of practically start to build this into a way of being at an organizational level? So I can see it on individual team levels, but at an organizational level, how do you start to really kind of shift that?
So I'm a big believer in kind of bottom-up meeting top-down.
Yes.
So I'm trying to think of a couple of things. So as we said before, communication is the most important. So why are we doing this? What's your aim? So for example, in our company, we are transitioning, I suppose. I think we're all in transition at the moment, but we were conscious that we need to diversify our business model. This is all before, kind of 2 years ago. And in order to keep up with technology, because we're an IT company in a sense, of knowing what is the most latest cloud computing and machine learning and AI and all that kind of stuff, we can't go down the almost, we forced ourselves to become this kind of learning culture or learning mindset. But we did it in a couple of ways. So first of all, we started to convert, and again, this is like over 2 years ago, we started to convert all our trainings into SPOCs, which stands for, so we maybe have heard of MOOCs, which is Mass Open Online Course. A SPOC is a small private online course. Mm-hmm. So it's basically taking these public MOOCs and then making a bit more, make more sense to the local company. And then so we started thinking about, well, what needs to go into this virtual course? What resources can we use? And then start to bring in curated stuff. So first of all, it's us making more resources than what were traditionally available. Then it's that sharing. It's like kind of, first of all, here is our course. Testimonials, highlighting teams where they have shared in the past, why they've shared it, what they want to do. And it's just that almost hammering that message out to say it's important. We ran a whole campaign called My Journey that takes you through what is
I think we've lost you again there, Toby. So I'm not sure if that's my